Uh-huh. Okay. So we're officially starting. Thank you very much, Dr. Simbanad, for meeting with me for this brief few minutes. As we start, could you just tell me your full name and your position with the University of the West Indies?
Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Godfrey St. Bernard, and I am the acting director of this Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies at the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine, Trinidad.
Good morning to you, and thank you so much for meeting with us and giving us a bit of your time. Well, as you know, Grenada is currently in its census phase, and we are undertaking our national population and housing census here. We started last year, continuing this year. A lot of issues because of COVID and so on, but but we're moving forward. We just want to get your opinion as to why a census is important and why should a country even bother undertaking something like this?
Well, a census, a population and housing census, is a critical exercise that is done in almost every country that aspires toward assuring that it can meet the needs of its peoples and the institutions that serve its peoples. Mm-hmm. It is an important exercise to the extent that some countries do not wait until 10 years have passed to do a population and housing census. Some countries do it every 5 years. And it is the only means that provides us with a basis for accounting for almost every human being that lives or have lived in a country at any particular point in time. So how the census is done? It is done every 10 years. There is a day that is referred to as Census Day, and at midnight of Census Day, we speak about Census Night. And it is really an attempt to account for how many persons were resident in the country or in the country on Census Night, or in some cases, how many persons ought to have been in the country on Census Night. Now, this is important because when we think in terms of human populations can be disaggregated according to the sex of the person, according to age of the person, according to education levels, whether persons have jobs or not, what kinds of jobs persons are engaged in, of course, ethnic background, religion, and the list goes on, and even in terms of disability status. And recently, I even saw, where in some instances in the Caribbean, given the number of languages that are spoken in some Caribbean countries, there is that trust toward understanding which languages people speak. So it's really an account of, the characteristic features of the people who are resident in a country at any given point in time. And that is important for, planning for building primary schools, secondary schools. In terms of tertiary level education, it is important in terms of, having a sense of, what is the size of your labor force in terms of persons who are of working age and how those numbers are changing, because once you have the account of the census as at Census Day, you can actually, based on other statistics that the National Statistical Office, in the case of Grenada, the CSO, the other statistics such as the number of live births in a given year, the number of deaths in a given year, and also the importance of migration statistics in terms of how many people enter Grenada in a given year, how many people leave Grenada permanently in a given year. You can actually track down changes in the population size and structure. And the census provides you with a basis for keeping track of, as accurately as you can, of those changes that take place, because, face it, I mean, between the censuses, during that 10-year period, there could be problems with your collection of some of those statistics on births and deaths and migration. And therefore, you need to keep track of, at some point in time, what is the size of your population? Mm-hmm. And therefore, once you can keep a sense of, what is the size of your population, then you can make the adjustments to ensure that as you account for population change, and population change is important because almost every indicator that tells us about, development status and development trust in our country focus on, the population numbers and what might be, what might be the magnitude of a particular indicator in terms of population size. So when we talk in terms of, economic activity, we talk about, gross domestic product, GDP per capita. And when we talk about GDP per capita, you must have some population count to make reference to. And the census does keep us on track with respect to those population counts. What I can also say is that, when we talk about development and advancing development agendas, I mean, as we speak, many countries have signed on to the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Mm-hmm. And insofar as countries have signed on to the Sustainable Development Agenda, and I am sure when 2030 rolls around, there will be another target in terms of a year set in terms of what we would like the goals of our country to be in, say, 2040 or 2045 or 2050. And if that is the case, then again, there have to be objectives, and the objectives that are set are normally objectives that are couched in terms of population numbers many a time. We talk about, what percentage of our population come 2040, 2050 we would like to see have attained tertiary level education. And if that is the case and you set those kinds of objectives to meet, goals pertaining to, more inclusive effort to serve, tertiary level education to your population, certainly you would need population projections. And population projections to 2040, 2050, what have you, are important because as you plan for the development of your country, you have to have some set of future trajectories. And taking a population census and having an adequate account of your population in terms of its size, number one, and how those sizes vary as you go across different age groups and sex groups and so on. Those are important because demographers and other scientists are trained to use mathematical and statistical techniques to project the population into the future to facilitate planning and so on. So we know today that in many countries of the Caribbean, we expect to see the population sizes of child populations declining over the years. Right? I always tell people, if you had looked at a census when I was born in the late 1950s, you would have found that there could have been, there was about 36,000 of us in Trinidad and Tobago, for example, who were born. And if you multiply 36,000 by 10, you would have had about 360,000 kids who would have been, say, between 0 to 9 years old, let's say. And when I say 0, I mean under 1. And 360,000. Today, in a country like Trinidad and Tobago, you would find that, we have about 16,000 children born. And per year. And when you multiply that by 10, you get 160,000. You could already see the drastic decline in the in child populations over the year. And I think the same kind of arithmetic could be done for Grenada in terms of, what will happen to that population of children over the years and what that may mean in terms of building, primary schools. And it's like, a snake swallowing its prey. So it eventually manifests itself in terms of declining populations of children of secondary school age and those who may eventually matriculate into university and things of that nature. Several countries, because of, declining fertility and slowing down of the population growth rate, are going to find themselves where the population is going to plateau at perhaps a historical maximum and then start declining in such a way that you have larger numbers of older persons in the population. And that kind of population shift is population censuses do help us to map those kinds of population shifts. So it is important, quite apart from being able to do the population projections, to actually undertake the census, because the census provides at some point in time, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, when a census is done, it provides some basis for validating population projections, because of course, the way population projections are done, it's really an educated guess into the future, because you are making assumptions, of course, assumptions that are guided by prospective population policy, assumptions that are guided by, rigid demographic theory, assumptions that are guided by, mathematical and statistical principles, and assumptions that are guided by, trends that have become manifest in the past and what is likely to happen in the future. So it's a lot of assumptions, and you make several assumptions because we don't have a crystal ball to, at any given point in time, to say what will happen in the future. So you have to sort of make some educated guesses, so to speak, about conjecture about what will happen in the future. And again, based on the fact that you have the population census done, you can apply those models, generate several outcomes, but in the future, you ought to have, of course, your census to help validate which of those outcomes would most likely be the most realistic, and then continue the exercise to facilitate planning and so on. So I hope I didn't say too much.
You were well, so thank you very much. But before you leave, I just wanted you to, for a very brief 30 seconds, just encourage Grenadians to participate, because from where you sit the importance of a census and what it really does for national building and that kind of a thing, and regional building, of course. So I just want you to very quickly just, encourage Grenadians to participate, and to just, participate honestly, because it's one thing to answer and another thing to answer incorrectly. So, for honest participation, I just want you to encourage our viewers.
Well, I would really urge, all Grenadians, because a census targets the entire population. And once one is collecting data to inform decision-making, and decision-making not just for the sake of decision-making, because every country that collects census data, every country is doing so with the expectation that the data that are collected from population members will redound to the benefit of the people who have provided the data. And, in our midst, everybody always complains sometimes that, the government, any given government, is not doing enough to help its people. But if you do not help the government to help you, then you can't expect the government to provide the kind of assistance that you clamor for. As a matter of fact, if it is that you provide the data and you provide the data willingly and truthfully, and I say truthfully because the collection of statistics is really shrouded in the importance of being able to collect valid data about the population, and valid data constitute data that are as truthful as possible. So it is expected that, when you respond as an individual in Grenada, on behalf of yourself, on behalf of your family members, on behalf of your household, that you respond as truthfully as possible. That is absolutely essential, that you respond as truthfully as possible, because without being truthful, you would threaten the validity of the data that are presented to the government and other agencies to make decisions that ought to be of benefit to different subpopulations in Grenada, whether you are talking about, local areas such as, the parish of St. David or the parish of St. Andrew or the parish of St. Mark or what have you, right? Or whether you are talking about specific households or even churches in different communities, right? You have to have some basis to account for the truth. And that could only be attained, first of all, if everybody willingly supports the census takers by responding to the questions posed in the questionnaire by the census takers. And if everybody, quite apart from responding to the questionnaires, speak truthfully to the questions and the concerns addressed in the census. I also want to state that we do understand that it is a different time in which, we are collecting such data, but I am absolutely sure, and it's not just in Grenada alone, but it is going to be all over the world. Around this time in particular, censuses are going to be conducted all over the Caribbean. And I am absolutely sure that there are international mandates, that come from international organizations about how censuses should be conducted and all of the safety protocols that are necessary to ensure and to limit, any contagion that may result as a result of your participation in the census. Of course, there are methodologies that have been developed to protect not only those who are collecting the data, but also those who are responding by giving data. And you should consider the fact that the persons who will be collecting the data and the authorities, in this case, the Central Statistical Office and the government of Grenada, have the well-being of Grenadian society well placed and up and foremost, and that every effort will be made to assure safety in the collection process. So I urge every one of you in Grenada who will eventually see a census officer coming to your door to collect data, or perhaps if there are other approaches that may involve, electronic processes for data collection, whatever the process is, I urge every Grenadian who is going to interact with the census to cooperate and to support the government, because it is in the best interest of Grenada that a census be taken. And it does not matter which government is in power in Grenada. All governments, whether and whenever in power, do have that obligation to conduct a census in keeping with its desire to preserve the sanctity of development process in Grenada. for the next generation, because it's not only about, what's happening now, it's about the future. And the census and a lot of what might be collected in the conduct of a census is about, preserving the sanctity of the future and ensuring that, quite apart from, what prevails now, that there are signs of growth and development and progress in enhancing the quality of life of Grenadians.
Wonderful. Dr. Sembenad, I want to thank you so very much. There was a lot of madness happening while we were having our interview here because we have our live health show coming up next. But we really did enjoy having you here and sharing your knowledge with us. And definitely, I hope that our viewers will appreciate the same. So thank you very much. And
okay, not
have
a
a
problem.
wonderful Trinidadian day.
Okay, I shall do so. And I hope I was able to address the requests in
yes,
a
definitely.
way that you would have expected me to.
Yes, and I hope we can have a further discussion another time. Yeah?
Not a problem
Wonderful,
at all. I'm always
okay.
available.
Take
Yes.
care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Yes. Okay.